You're okay. You're okay.
I'd like to call to order the Middletown City Council special meeting with the Park Board for Tuesday, May 2nd, 2023. Let's go ahead and start with a moment of meditation followed by the Pledge of Allegiance since we're gathered here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Gank, will you please call the roll for us?
Mr. Farrell.
Here.
Ms. Nenny. Here. Mr. Moon. Here. Mr. Muterspaw.
Here.
Mayor Condrey.
Here. Are we also doing a roll call for the Park Board today?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't know if Allie wanted to do that.
Do you want me to?
Sure.
Okay, Irene Earl.
Here.
Steve Lewis.
Here.
David Pierce.
Here.
Matthew Armbruster.
Here.
And Danielle Woodward was unable to make it.
Okay, for the record, Danielle Woodward is not here. The rest of the members are here since I'm sure it's going to be tough to read or hear that later. So thank you. No problem. Okay, do we have a motion to receive and file the special meeting documents?
So moved.
Second?
Ms. Gank, you please call the roll.
Ms. Nenny.
Yes.
Mr. Moon.
Yes.
Mr. Muterspaw.
Yes.
Mayor Condrey.
Yes.
Mr. Farrell.
Yes.
Okay, this evening we have a request to discuss Miami Park with the Park Board. We're glad to have you all here and a chance to get together, so thank you so much for coming in today. And I don't know if somebody is planning to lead the discussion or where we want to start with this, but I'll open the floor to whoever would like to start.
Can I make a suggestion? Sure. Maybe they could sit in the front row with the microphone since staff maybe will
Yeah.
not be participating as much as Park Board.
Yeah,
Would
that'd be a good
okay?
idea.
And then,
Great idea.
Go on my job, didn't you?
out
Stairs?
You're really,
I want to see who's going to sit at the
You're
law
dismissed,
director's
Mr.
seat.
Lawley.
Nathan, you going upstairs?
Absolutely.
Uh-oh, we got Steve Lewis in charge.
see you next week.
Holy.
I'm going to need to get a photo of this if you
I feel like this might have
Steve, you
been
gotta
a
sit
beer
there.
can or something.
Steve is in charge.
Want your water? It'll be fine. I'll just.
You're all looking fine up there. Okay, if anyone wants to start the conversation, can have an open floor.
I guess I'll lead the charge. So I've talked to, first of all, thanks everybody for the time for being here early. So I talked to many of you on the park board about obviously the process of if we, the city, however you want to look at it, the partnership, ultimately with some sort of builder, if a neighborhood, or let's not call it a neighborhood, but if a select number of houses came into Miami Park, ultimately what would that look like? What would be best for the neighborhood? What would be best for the parks, for the kids in the area, everything else? So one thing that you all asked me to do was come back with sort of, for lack of a better term, a concept on what something would look like. Discuss with many members of, do we make the whole thing a park? Do we make it a smaller park and put residential units, and then the city can then sell off some of the park in order to specifically go to that part to upgrade the basketball court, all the different items that are there. So I think this is something that, if this were to progress ultimately, that could fill a couple voids, a couple needs. So first off, let's talk for 30 seconds. Let's talk about housing in Middletown right now. So from the 150 to 230 price point in Middletown, there are currently 29 listings. 24 of those are under contract, so that leaves 5 right now that are not under contract. So essentially you have one house at that price point going under contract every single day. Of those 5 that are not under contract, 4 of them were listed within the last week. So once again, we have a pretty hot housing market. Those generally at that price point are going to be people that are coming into the city. They're going to have jobs. They're going to hopefully be paying an income tax to the city or some sort of self-employment tax to the city, or at least producing in our economy, restaurants, those different types of things. So we only have one house at that price point that has been on the market longer than a week. So let's talk about the 230 to 300 price point, because I think that's probably ultimately where a lot of these homes, that if they were to go in there, would be. We currently have 10 on the market. So there's 12 actually if you look on the market right now from 230 to 300, but 11 of them are in Middletown. One of them is a to be built. So we currently have 10 houses on the market. 9 of them are under contract. The house that is not under contract has been on the market for many days, and it's been reduced and reduced and reduced. So what does that tell us? There is a need and a want to be in Middletown at this price point. When you look at Middletown as a whole, about 58% of people work in the adult age range. When you look at Hamilton, it's the high 60s. When you look at Fairfield, you go into 80%. So when you start talking about our income tax of the city operating off 2/3 of a budget of other cities, we have to be able to get families into this area that are going to work. Also, if you look at price points of sales, so once their houses, historically, from what I've seen, this is my experience obviously in my studies, but once people's houses start getting to the 200 and above price point, as far as investors owned, a lot of those people start selling those houses off, and they go into other markets where they can capitalize on a higher return on average for their rents. So if ultimately this area, if we can start to push it to the 225 to 250 area, which is going to happen naturally, obviously a lot of that has to do with lack of inventory, which this actually goes towards helping. Inflation, those different types of things. But I think this area it's on its way to that price point anyways. So my thought is potentially, and obviously this is just the beginning of this, but if we go into this area and we can put nicer homes, higher quality homes, we get into more owner-occupied homes sooner, and that's going to increase probably investment in the area. People are going to take care of their yards better, hopefully, those types of things. And then also, if we were to sell this land off, obviously everybody in this room knows we have a problem of we haven't upkept our parks for many years. That goes back to many different reasons, nothing to do with councils. It's just the way it's played out. So if we could sell this land for $50,000, for $100,000, whatever that number is, we could directly invest that into the park here, which ultimately would make this park, although it would be a little bit smaller, it would hopefully make this a higher quality park. And then obviously we have the issue of the trees. This obviously is the beginning of just a layout that I came up with, but can we move some of these trees around to where we could once again help with the infrastructure of this park? Could we put them in other parks where it makes sense? I don't know. You guys are the park board. I'm just a guy up here that has this idea. So anyways, that's kind of where I wanted to start it with, and I'll let somebody else take it from here.
And what are the lot sizes?
I don't know the answer to that because I don't have a plan for it. This is just something that I sort of drew up. I can come back with.
May I ask what the lot sizes are across the street? On the east side?
I know that these are wider than the ones across the street.
Okay.
I know that for a fact when I drew this up.
Steve, I kind of drug and drew on, it was either the auditor or Google Earth. I think they were either 40 or 50 foot lots. They're pretty small lots, the ones that exist.
On Miami?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not mistaken, don't hold me to this, but there's 10 houses across the street, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I counted them.
Yeah.
Yep.
And from what I looked at least 5 of them are rental homes. And I think you'll find in that neighborhood that it would not surprise me if the rental rate in that neighborhood were somewhere around 60%. So I would also say that if the city were to progress with something like this, we would put some sort of deed restriction that all these homes for, let's say, 7-8 years would all have to be owner occupied.
And the gray line that separates the southwest, does that signify anything, or is it just a gray line?
If I'm not mistaken, that is some sort of,
An alleyway for rear load garage?
I don't know what it is. It's the way it was laid out on the auditor's website.
Okay.
I don't know exactly, but I assume we
I think
can,
Matt or Tal's probably, it could be an alleyway because of back garages on that side.
yeah.
With a couple of the properties that we have in Middletown, for instance, the old Lincoln School site, Roosevelt site, why are we looking at, or, thinking about this when we don't even have those built out yet? I mean, why take a park when we have those other two areas, even where the old high school was? That's a question I have.
I can answer, or somebody else can go. So, I don't want it to, I don't want to feel like I'm bringing this and first of all trying to like cram this down people's throats. It's an idea. In my mind, why you would do that. So I think council staff has tried to work on the old Vale site. They've tried to work on the Lincoln site. We've had proposals, but nothing really that in my mind is high quality enough to put out to everybody in Middletown. It's not fair to Middletown. This, in my opinion, I think you have the ability to do two things. I think you have the ability to bring in with the lot sizes, the infrastructure's already there with the roads, and then I think we could also charge a builder sewer tap fee, so I think that would help the rest of the residents of Middletown. But I think you have the ability to bring up the neighborhood by putting these houses here, as well as getting more tax-paying citizens into Middletown. And I think you can ultimately, and we can talk about funding parks, like that's probably a separate conversation in my mind. I do think that it is something to look at, but I think that if we sold, we as the city, however you want to look at it, the citizens, if we were able to sell this lot for $100,000 and then proportion another part of the park off and put that $100,000 theoretically directly into that park, I think you're able to add something without potentially taking something away.
If I might add on to that,
Yeah.
because, I mean, we have put out for RFQ and received proposals for both of those sites. We have a preferred builder for Roosevelt, so barring something changes, Roosevelt will be built out. We've received submissions for Lincoln School. We're working through the process of what will that look like? Do we have someone we want to work with? Do we have someone we don't want to work with? I think Zach's question is, do we want to do that here? Or do we want to leave it how it is? Do we want to go down the process of saying, hey, we're going to open this up and say, are there builders that are interested in building 5, 6, 8, 10, 15 houses on it? Do we want to downsize a park there, or do we want to leave it the same? So it's kind of just the step before we would go to the steps that we've done on Roosevelt and Lincoln. And then Vale, it's kind of a whole nother market, whole different set of challenges as opposed to the 3 sites you mentioned, in my mind.
I also think you have the opportunity to prove a concept here. So if you go to Lincoln, I mean, how many, you're going to have, let's say 50, 40, somewhere around that number of houses there, duplexes or whatever you want to call them that ultimately it ends up being. If you go to Vale, you're going to have the same situation. You've got, let's say 100 houses there. And yeah, we can go through Middletown and there's obviously different lots where houses have been torn down where houses can go. But if you can prove on a small concept that something like this can work, because I do believe, in my opinion, as a realtor, resident, whatever, that the Roosevelt side, I think you're going to have homes selling there for $400,000. I think this is, in my mind, you're going to picture houses that are $285,000 to $325,000, just what I think currently where we're at, are going to go into here. And I think if you can prove concept here, then that trickles down into the other out parcels. So I think this could be something that sort of starts rejuvenating other parts of Middletown. Because it is, I've always saw this neighborhood as the make it or break it part of Middletown. I remember when they used to have block parties in this neighborhood. I remember growing up, it was one of the nicer neighborhoods. And then I remember houses were selling in this neighborhood 4 years ago for $20,000. And it's getting better and it's getting better and it's getting better. But I think developers, builders are always going to look at this neighborhood right here to see how good Middletown housing market's doing.
This is pretty much something like this that's been built in Middletown is like Titus and Manchester.
I would say it would probably end up being a higher quality version of that, but I don't
similar to
I don't disagree
build
with that
the
at all. Yeah.
Neighborhood up and
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all.
I guess I'm just curious, Park Board's opinion. Is Park Board open to this idea either at this park or other parks in general, or is it a non-starter completely? You know, because we are adding a park. We're going to add a park across the street here in the next 2 or 3 years, so we would still be adding park inventory to the city. So I'm just more curious than anything.
And the size, 1.3 acres, is that, I don't know how that compares. It seems like a small park. How many parks do we have that are 1.3 acres or less? I don't know.
Well, is that the remaining acreage?
Yeah, so that would be what's left for the park.
I mean, it's hard because both things are good, right? Like, we need new houses, we need good parks. Like, independently, we're both probably, everybody here is probably in favor of both of them, but then they're kind of competing in this situation, so it's this tension over two positive things for the city.
I mean, it's this is a Pandora box for us just because of that we're passionate to be involved for the size of the city and to have these numbers of parks, which our park master plan basically said we're really lucky to have what we have. Now, we all understand somebody was bankrolling a lot of this for us, and that was Armco Steel. Where am I going with this? We're very aware of the maintenance cost of these green spaces. That's just to maintain them, let alone update them and make them safe. The discussion has come up before in our meetings that, what can we do to help staff make their lives a little bit easier and not break the bank with the city? And of course, we watch some of these parks, and are they being used? Again, we want to refer back to the master plan as much as we possibly can until it's kind of worn itself out or we start utilizing it. I think also what's important would be, what does the neighborhood feel? And I know you guys, I'm sure you're aware of that. And I know Zach and I had spoken that, I think that it will be important to hear from the neighborhood how they feel about it. I was by there this weekend, watched probably 20, 30 people in it. I sat over there yesterday and today, nobody was in it, weekday. So I'm not saying, for my part, I'm not open to it. I mean, I'm open to hear anything. But it's new. Monica brought it up in our meeting, this past meeting. I felt like we needed to table it because it was just new. I needed to digest it a little bit and hear what the whole program was about. Is the city going to hold the contract? Are you selling the land, and then there's stipulations, and then the lot sizes. We're hearing where we waive this park fee sometimes. We're a little bit concerned about that. So there's just a lot of things. I don't know if I'm helping answer your question, but a yes or no, I mean, I'm open to it, at least I am, but there's some details that need to get pounded out.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I just said I agree.
Yeah, I would agree as well. I've got an open mind about it because Zach hit on it, that we really don't have an effective long-term funding mechanism for our parks. And so ultimately, I mean, that puts pressure on our parks because they deteriorate. We don't have any money to reinvest in them, and then they become an eyesore, and they're a complaint for the neighborhood that the park has deteriorated to the point where it really can't be effectively used and maintained. So when we look at an opportunity like this that is generating some capital that could be reinvested in the site, I think that's a good thing. It also is an opportunity to reduce the maintenance cost, albeit the park is smaller, it should be cheaper to operate. And what might we be able to do with that money either on this site or any other site? But I think at the core of it is the whole funding mechanism for our parks. We really can't continue to go down the same path in this community and think that our parks are going to improve. They're just going to get worse. And I have to applaud you for your discussions and commitment earlier this year about committing some dollars to our park. That's the first time in a really long time in this community the council has done that. So I applaud you for your interest in the parks and your commitment and recognition of where we find our parks today. I like this particular, just on the surface, what I'm hearing, because the economics are good for the neighborhood, and I think they're good for the city because we're getting more homeowners owning homes. And I think these homes, I didn't ask the question, but I'm going to assume that at $285 to $325 price target, that this is going to raise the value of the other homes in the neighborhood. And so that's a good thing for people in those neighborhoods that already own those homes. Is that a fair assumption?
So in real estate, we can't speculate into the future legally, but I would hope so. And I understand there's the argument about property taxes, but obviously anybody that's paid attention lately, property taxes are going to go up one way or another. I think I taught a class once in real estate, and it was all about how African Americans were redlined years and years and years ago. And they never had the opportunity to build generational wealth that they could pass on to their families. And that's set back African Americans in different nationalities for many, many years. This potentially could help with changing generations of families' futures. And most people probably don't even realize, because until I taught this class, I didn't realize it either. But if the average house in this neighborhood, it's already gone up a tremendous amount, but if it continues to go up, that's sending grandchildren to college. That's if somebody gets sick or injured or hurt, it's the difference between them being bedridden for years maybe and being able to get out of that. Therapy, different things like that. So this isn't just a park. This isn't just a new development, but it's actually, I think, potentially can intentionally change people's lives long term.
Yeah, I think by increasing home ownership, if that drives more home ownership in this area, that's a really good thing for the city, right? If it incents people to buy and own and we get more owner-occupied properties in this neighborhood, that would be a huge win.
One thing, Dave, is you know, and I'll just speak freely, is one of our top complaints is we don't have housing. We have people that live here whose kids live here. There's no houses available in the housing thing. So we have a thing in this city, and we've said it for years, and some of it is very justified. I always think back to the Hill, and that's just my opinion. But people say we need housing, but not in my neighborhood. We hear that all the time. We need more houses, but don't put it where I live. So that's what we run out of room. We're landlocked. We don't have that. We're not Trenton or, you know, one of these places that have this sprawling cornfields where we can build stuff. We don't have that. But with that being said, also is somebody like yourself who loved the parks and who grew up in the parks. It's always hard for me to think of parks being, any spot being taken away. But I certainly see why Zach brought this up, because we're out of options on where to put housing. We just don't have a lot of options. The other thing, you talked about the money, but me personally, I don't think we're putting enough money into the parks. I talked to some people in the know and talked about what playground equipment cost, and I was stunned what playground equipment cost to install it. I was like, my goodness, what we put aside for that out of ARPA or whatever we took it out as a drop in the hat compared to what it would really cost. So I'm also concerned also about special events. We have great special events, but is that cutting into the budget for the actual infrastructure of the parks? And I talked to some people who made that clear that may be going on, something we need to look at. I think money just needs to keep pushing in those parks because people want good parks. You know, there's a reason so many in Middletown go to other cities' parks. Franklin, Miamisburg, I can name 5 or 6. We need to change that, but if we remove land for housing, it's got to be the right situation. It can't just be any park. It's got to be the park board, the neighbors, that whole neighborhood, the council's all got to approve that. I think one of the reasons Zach brought up Miami Park is because it's right next to Sunset Park. And that was a big thing too. It's literally right down the street. And so I think that's one thing that you addressed why that would be okay.
For lack of a better term, I don't think we want a park desert for a neighborhood. I don't know, is that fair to say?
Yeah. But I understand what you guys are saying, but I think this is just a test in the waters, correct? To see if it's something worth even discussing.
Yeah, and I think if ultimately this ended up happening, I think, Steve, you said it, this would go out for RFQ, in my mind. highest and best offer. That's what I would call it in real estate, right? So we don't want to just take the best offer as far as money. Maybe we do if it's the best quality, but I think that we have to, once again, if we were to do something like this, we only get one opportunity at it. So it has to look right, and it has to feel right, and it has to be right for everyone. And that would be my goal if this did proceed, that it works for everyone.
Yeah, I think a key thing is to make sure you engage the neighborhood in this conversation and fully explain it to them, get their input, and answer any questions they may have. I mean, you did a good job earlier this year when you were looking at the former MRH site, and I think, Rodney, you even said, focused in on listening to the neighbors and the neighborhood, and that really drove your decision at the end on how you felt about that property. I think this has got to go the same route. You really got to see what the neighbors have to say about it. But I think it's worthy of looking into because the components of it seem to make sense, and where it gets us seems to make sense.
We have some special parks, we really do, and all of us that grew up in those parks understand that. And you can't keep something because you grew up there, but man, it's nice to have the neighborhood parks. It just really is. We just need to take better care of them and that's not on staff, that's on council, this council, and whatever. We got to make sure staff has the money they need to fix these parks. It's that simple.
I think, we also have to be realistic, and this may not go over very well with some people, which I'm pretty notorious about, but things have changed that entertain children and that entertain people. We didn't have these 20 years ago. What we had was a Stingray bike and slides and little secret pockets of woods that we could go hang out at and do whatever. In a sense, this concept is pretty interesting in the fact that you're keeping a park, but you're fine-tuning it. You're bringing it down in size for maintenance. To please everyone is going to be very difficult. I agree 100% with Rodney that, I've been kind of following Roosevelt development on a couple social media sites, and man, I thought we had a hornet's nest up at the old high school, but they're not real thrilled about the Roosevelt site from what I've seen. So, there's the balance. As I came down here tonight, I looked over and I had, I'm looking at that bend, and what are we going to do with this wedge? Well, you answered that, and it's great. Tree-wise, you're pretty screwed on getting those moved. They're pretty big.
You know more about that than me, so I don't want
A very nice gentleman by name of Dave Dennis, who grew up in this town, planted those on his own, literally seedlings. Sorry to go into the nostalgia. With Miami Park, that runs into my family because my family grew up over there, my mother and father, and there was a huge kind of not a war, but Miami kids and Sunset kids. They were only 3 blocks away, but that's how it was. So, sentimental-wise, and going down kind of the wrong road, I see this as potentially a good thing. But getting the gears turned and changed, we got to figure that out. The salesmanship and the benefit. Dave was very good in our meeting last week, and I thought he really brought up one of the main key questions was, what's the benefit, right? What's the benefit of losing the park and then putting these houses on it? What do we gain? What does Middletown gain from this? And it was just a question. Again, that's when I was like, okay, time out. We need to try and figure what your thoughts are.
So I have a cornucopia of different comments, since I haven't spoken yet. Steve had said that there was families with young children at the park on Sunday, I think you said. I'm pretty happy to see that they're not in the park during the weekday on Monday or Tuesday. That means that they're either in school or at work, I would hope. When I first moved to Middletown, my son was 3. Walking 3 blocks to a park might be a little strenuous for young children. So in order to get the kids out and going, something that's close and nearby is a good idea. Now, it is a smaller park. Anyway, that's my comments on that. I don't know if there's room to like move this to a different section so that the people that are directly across the street have visual access. I know there's a point where, you know, your kids turn 10, 11, 12, and you don't really want them out of your sight, but they want the independence. So there's a lot of child development and things like that that goes into that. An offhand comment, I can't remember whether it was, all I can remember is his son's name. It's Luke Farrell, because my kid went to school with him.
Lamar?
Yes. I think that it was him, but there is in the park board minutes history, just so that you guys are not constantly reinvestigating things. Somewhere in the minutes, somebody did an assessment on equipment and equipment improvement. I don't know whether it was them for Ellie's Hope or whether it was in the bigger picture of the park board. I've been on the park board for a long time, and I see things going cyclical. This is a brand new idea, not heard this one before. But there's a lot of stuff that's gone on, and I'm impressed that you guys invited us because we've been saying for a long time, probably should have asked. I am going to do my soapbox for a second. I live near Roosevelt, and I don't know why the park board, also known as the tree board, you know where I'm going with this, was not consulted when they tore down all those white pines that Steve planted. Like that, right there at the corner of Central and Edgewood. They just cut them to the ground. There were, what, 10, 20?
Yeah.
There was a lot of
It
them.
was 15.
So that's my soapbox on
That was
that
at the
one.
Lincoln School site? You said Roosevelt. Are we talking
Yeah.
about Lincoln?
That'd be Lincoln if it was on Edgewater.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Lincoln.
sorry, it's Lincoln.
I'm sorry, yes, it is. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
Lincoln.
sorry. My kid went to Roosevelt when Officer Davis was doing.
Arguably, I think council actually was not aware that that was happening either. I recall a lot of surprising.
I think a lot of residents called in about that too. There was a lot of, and it's on the edge of the property, so, I don't, it's under the water now, but.
Sure.
Anywho, there are a lot of vacant lots. Is there any thought to having a developer come in and develop those independently?
We have been in conversation with city staff about compiling a list that I think they've been working on for all of the available vacant properties inside of the city limits that are developable as infill sites.
Okay.
I don't know where staff is with that, but that is something that's been worked on.
But also we have released many, not all, or I don't know what the percentage would be, but a lot of infill lots have went out there, different areas of Middletown, and not a ton of interest, I would say, overall.
I don't think there are a lot of vacant lots in this particular neighborhood. I know that there are in other neighborhoods in Middletown, and so maybe that's part of the point to be made about this neighborhood versus others, but we do have a lot of vacant properties in the city that are large enough to have homes built on them.
That was one of my thoughts as well, was this seems like, it is an extreme way of going about adding homes, and in some ways it seems like the easy way, right? Like, well, there's land, let's take it. Not saying that it's a bad idea, it is extreme, and I will never get that green space back, and one of the things I would like to see is more advertising of the vacant lots, and also pursue foreclosure and resale of homes that instead of giving them to the land bank for demolition, that the city actually keeps them and tries to resell them to someone who wants to actually renovate the homes. Because historically, we've given them to the land bank, they get torn down, and they end up vacant lots that aren't going to get filled back in. And we have not done a very good job as a city of trying to get those back on the market or pursuing the foreclosure of those homes. So that's another way that it's a harder route, right, than just taking the green space, but it is another way I think we as a city need to look at things. I am glad that you left some green space in there. I didn't expect that, and I thought that was great. and one thing I also wanted to say was if we're going to ask the neighborhood, I want to make sure we're asking owner-occupied neighbors, because the renters, sorry, but of course they're going to say keep the green space. They have no vested interest in the neighborhood
Correct,
growth, so.
correct. How are sales going at Sawyer Mill?
I have no idea.
Good the last time, I don't have an
Isn't
exact.
that in the price range that you were quoting?
Sawyer's Mill is gonna be at a much higher price point than this.
Okay, so it's not, that's apples to oranges.
Yeah.
And just a little bit of humor, if you know anybody that wants to get rid of one of those houses, my son's looking for something to flip.
There you go.
I'm open-minded to it, about it, but the one thing, not just this park, but any park, if this goes, if we do something like this, quality, you make quality, I mean, that's huge, it's important, talking to the neighbors. Going back to the Hill, before we found out about this, I feel that me as a resident there, I didn't know anything about it until it was like, boom, there. The other thing would be if this is such a special plot or any other property the city owns, not to give away tap-in fees. Maybe the builder could, or the developer could put the money in this 1.3 acres instead of the city, and then take the money that we receive for this property and put it into another park. Now, $100,000 or whatever it is won't go far, but it's just not there. It's, you know, trying to get them to invest as well. And I think if we go about that the correct way, I think it might be accepted by the neighbors, and that it looks like the neighborhood, that it fits in with the neighborhood. That is key. That's huge. And that can be done nowadays, obviously. So those are my feelings about it. I am open-minded to it. I agree. I also feel that we need a long-term plan for our parks, whether it be the council giving more money, maybe just throwing this out, a small levy, just whatever. But our parks are so, so important. Bike pass. I talk to the customers every week that say, hey, I was on the bike path and this and that. So our parks are being used, our bike paths are being used. It's important. And I think they would be used more if we put some money into them.
I have a question. I heard proof of concept on this one. Is the goal to do this with other parks as well, or is this a one-off? Or is there some master plan to take over all of the?
I have no master plan. Promise, swear.
I just wanted to
I am
clarify.
a politician, but I swear. No, I mean, in my opinion, searching all over the parks in Middletown to where this would even make financial sense to where houses could sell, you maybe have one or two other parks that would, I don't know what you want to say, economically make sense, but I think I have no interest in doing this in any other park right now because you don't even have a proof of concept. You can't really go in and start putting this on people without a proof of concept. And this isn't saying that I want proof of concept here to move this to other places. I want proof of concept here so we can go to the Lincoln site, so we can go to the Vale site, so we can go to the infill sites. This isn't to push it on to other parks. This is for the good of the real estate market in Middletown. We have a need, and I think this can fill the need, help fill the need in many ways. At the end of the day, we're losing green space, and I understand that, but we're not losing a park. We're actually going to have a higher quality park, and I think that's something we can't forget.
We're gaining 10 families. 10 houses, 8 houses, or 9, does it really make that big of a difference? I mean, is this going to jumpstart that neighborhood? Who knows? I mean, we have to do that also. We have to figure that out. Some of the things that were said is people will begin to take care of their yards, take care of their homes, and these 10 houses are going to do that. That's a big question to get a big answer for. I'm not 100% sure.
I would agree with Matt that, coming from that neighborhood, those homes, from Aberdeen and Sutphin and Miami, all those homes are actually pretty unique. I mean, some of them are 4 stories, right? Basement, 1, 2, 3, and then a livable attic. the architecture and some of the woodwork is unbelievable in those homes. They're not
Can't recreate it.
great.
Yeah.
They're not Main Street and they're not the Highlands, but boy, they are really unique homes. Hence, the reason we were kind of screaming about the hospital site. You know, what are we doing here to help fit it in? I get it. You can't, you know, nowadays to build a home like that, I understand. We're in the millions of dollars. But I agree 100% with Matt that the concept of these homes, it needs to fit. It really does. Do you find a builder like that? I don't know, you know?
With that being said, I know we've only got a few more minutes here. Is this, I just kind of want to bring it down back to some actionable item. Is this something that everyone feels would be worthy of asking staff to look into further and to possibly follow up with an RFQ, which would allow us to be discernible about what proposals came in and say yes or no based on what's being proposed?
Staff, as you well know, I mean, I'm all about, staff is your working group. You know, obviously staff needs to be involved, but I think they, you know, who's ever working with the Sawyer Point, all these new developments has a viewpoint on the maintenance end of it, how's it gonna work, the street, all those different things. So I hope that this will move, but as the chair, I have no problems with this moving forward to at least get some input from staff, get a more solid plan, concept, no offense, but.
Not a professional.
Yeah, it's all good.
And to add to that,
And
I think Irene's point about moving the green space in this park to a different part is
I
something
think
that we
she
should
has a
look
very
into as
valid
well. I
point.
think that's important to note.
Now, the days of us sneaking through backyards to get over to other parks, I don't know if that happens anymore.
Everybody has a ring camera.
Yeah, everyone's got a ring phone or a pit bull, but with that said, yeah, I think a couple different variations, but again, the neighborhood, we need to open it up to them.
So staff input, neighborhood input, and then proposal.
I was gonna say, before we go to RFQ.
Yeah, for
Some sort of, I mean, it's a chicken and the egg, because you say, look at this proposal, and then they're like, you didn't even tell us, and it's like, well, we haven't bid it, it's just a pencil and a paper. So, yeah.
But we appreciate you
appreciate
guys inviting us down.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Zach. We
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here, guys.
Okay, well, we'll adjourn the Park Board City Council special meeting, and we'll re-adjourn for the regularly scheduled meeting here in about a minute and a half. Thank you.